Welcome back, everybody. Clinical Trials Day is happening this Saturday. It's pretty significant in the medical world and really to our entire community. Joining us now to explain more in depth, Singing River Health System Medical Director of Pulmonary Critical Care and Pulmonary Hypertension, Dr. Ijlal Babar. Good to see you, Dr. Babar, and thanks for coming by. You know, when I think of clinical trials, I think of pharmaceutical tests and things like that, but this is beyond, it's something different than that?
Well, I mean, the pharmaceutical test is usually what these clinical trials are, but, before drugs can be, enabled for the public to use, we have to put them through trials to make sure that they actually work and they don't have any serious side effects.
And how does that work? How do you go about doing that?
So, for example, right now, we are running a trial for patients with acute respiratory failure, kind of sort of the thing that COVID caused. And if patients are eligible, then we approach them, and if they qualify and they're agreeable, we would give them the medication and see if it shortens the course of this acute respiratory failure.
And I hate to use the word sponsor, but who's kind of behind this? Is it the pharmaceutical industry? Is it the federal government, FDA? Who's kind of behind these particular trials?
So it varies. Rarely is it the government. It's always going to be private enterprise. It could be a giant pharmaceutical firm, or it could be a startup that's doing it. In our case, it's a relatively small firm that's doing it, but it varies.
And you've done these in the past, so what's generally the result? What kind of data comes out of it? Are some of them just tossed aside as it didn't work and others move on to the next stage?
Only a very small percentage of all the drugs that come into trial actually make it to being used. Our experience the last time, and not all of these trials are on brand new drugs. We were involved in a trial during the COVID crisis in seeing how giving patients anticoagulants helped their outcomes. And we were part of this national trial. There were about 30 centers in the entire United States. And what we figured out based on that trial was that if we gave patients therapeutic doses of anticoagulation, we prevented clots forming in them. But if we gave them, for example, antiplatelet drugs, it didn't change their outcomes.
And I find it rather interesting in terms of the patients. You said those patients who are eligible. How does that process work?
It's a very rigorous process, actually, because the pharmaceutical companies and whoever is designing the trial, they want to get the right patients. If patients have a lot of confounding illnesses or even other medications that can interact, we're not going to be able to get reliable results. So those exclusion criteria are really important for us.
And sometimes we may find the next, I hate to sound dramatic, miracle drug out there as a result of clinical trials like these.
Yes, we do. And we're hopeful, for example, this one would probably be the first drug, if it worked, for a disease called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, because there are no drugs for this. All we do is put patients on the ventilator and wait for them to improve, which can take weeks. But if this drug were to work, we would shorten their course.
That's fascinating.
Would be miraculous.
Clinical trials out at Singing River Health System. Dr. Ijlal Babar, always good to see you, Dr. Babar.
Always good to see you,
Thanks
Dave.
for coming by. We
Thank you for
appreciate
having me.
And stay with us on the 4 o'clock show. Find out how artificial intelligence could drive our economy in the not too distant future.